Hello, esteemed gentlemen. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just looks at you, and suddenly you forget what you were about to say. Most people think intimidation comes from muscles, money, or loud voices. Wrong. The most intimidating person in any room is usually the one who says the least, the one who doesn't try to impress, doesn't chase attention, and doesn't need a crowd to feel alive. Psychologists have found that humans fear what they can't predict, and Sigma males are exactly that: unpredictable, unreadable, and untamed. There's something unnerving about a man who doesn't flinch under pressure, doesn't react to provocation, and doesn't need anyone's approval to breathe. He's not playing hard to get. He just genuinely doesn't need what everyone else is desperate for. That alone short-circuits egos and confuses people who measure worth by validation. And the funny thing? He's not trying to intimidate anyone. He might just be sipping his coffee, minding his business, and suddenly someone's questioning their life choices because his silence feels like judgment from the universe. This is how Sigma males unknowingly intimidate people, not with aggression or attitude, but with an effortless kind of power that doesn't beg to be noticed. It's the calm that unnerves chaos, the stillness that exposes noise, and the quiet confidence that makes the loudest ones shrink. Because when a Sigma enters the picture, the atmosphere shifts, not through force, but through presence. And that, right there, is the kind of dominance no one sees coming until it's too late. Number 1, their standards expose others' compromises. Sigma males live by a set of standards so unshakable that they almost seem invisible until someone crosses them. They don't announce rules or make speeches about how people should act. They simply exist at a level that forces others to measure themselves. People around them quickly realize how much they've been cutting corners, settling for less, or pretending to be satisfied with mediocrity. That realization is uncomfortable, and it's exactly why Sigma males unknowingly intimidate. When a Sigma shows up in a room, he isn't competing. He isn't trying to impress or dominate. He's simply living according to his principles, refusing to bend, compromise, or conform to anyone else's expectations. The quiet consistency of his standards is like a spotlight on every little compromise someone else has made. Those who are comfortable with shortcuts and half measures feel the weight of their own choices because the Sigma doesn't negotiate, excuse, or overlook. He doesn't cheer you on for showing up or pretend that good enough is acceptable. His presence alone becomes a silent audit of your life, exposing the cracks you've been glossing over. It's not about judgment, it's about reflection. The Sigma isn't there to shame, yet people feel the sting of their own lowered expectations. When someone tries to justify their compromises, the Sigma doesn't argue or explain. He doesn't need to. His standards speak for themselves. And in that silence, people start comparing their own actions and choices against a benchmark they didn't even know existed. That comparison makes them uneasy, sometimes resentful, and often deeply intimidated. This isn't a tactic, it's an inherent effect of being unwavering. People fear what they cannot fake, manipulate, or shortcut around. A Sigma's standards are a mirror that reflects uncomfortable truths about ambition, integrity, and self-discipline. And because those truths can't be sugar-coated or ignored, most people instinctively feel small around someone who simply refuses to lower his bar. The Sigma doesn't demand compliance, applause, or admiration. He just exists at a level where compromises can't hide. That level of uncompromising authenticity is quietly terrifying, and it leaves people questioning themselves long after he's gone. Number 2. They see through social illusions. Instantly, Sigma males have a rare ability to cut through the layers of pretension, hierarchy, and ego that most people spend their lives meticulously constructing. They don't need to analyze endlessly or play detective to figure out who is genuine and who is putting on a show. They just see it. This ability is subtle, almost invisible, but it's profoundly intimidating to anyone who relies on smoke and mirrors to navigate the social world. People who are used to hiding behind charm, status, or empty words suddenly feel exposed because the Sigma doesn't play the game. He doesn't need to. He observes, understands, and mentally files the truth in a way that leaves manipulators deeply unsettled. What makes this so unnerving is that a Sigma male rarely calls out the falsehoods directly. He doesn't confront with words or accusations. His awareness alone, his quiet recognition of the charade, is enough to make people overthink every gesture, every word, and every action. Someone trying to manipulate or bluff around him immediately senses that their efforts are transparent. The realization hits them subtly but powerfully. He already knows, and because he doesn't react in predictable ways, they can't gauge how to fix it, influence him, or even intimidate him back. This insight gives Sigma males a silent dominance in social dynamics. They are fully aware of the unspoken rules, the hidden motives, and the games everyone else is playing. That awareness is not used to control or bully. It's simply a byproduct of their observation and intelligence. But to others, it looks like power and it feels threatening. People unconsciously shrink or stumble around a Sigma because they realize their social tricks, their ego-driven posturing, and their manipulations have no effect. There's no need for loud displays, no arguments, no shows of superiority. The Sigma's understanding of social reality is so complete that it makes everyone else's efforts feel fragile, hollow, and amateurish. And that is the kind of intimidation that is quiet but absolute. Not through aggression, but through the piercing clarity of seeing reality as it is, while everyone else is still lost in the illusion. Number 3. They're too self-contained to be controlled. Sigma males exist in a way that makes the concept of control almost meaningless. They aren't easily swayed by flattery, money, guilt trips, or even emotional manipulation. Most people spend their lives seeking approval, reassurance, or external validation. But the Sigma already has that from within. His sense of self-worth doesn't fluctuate based on other people's opinions or reactions. And that stability is profoundly unsettling to those who depend on influencing others to feel powerful. Because he operates from a place of internal validation, the usual levers that society or manipulators pull simply don't work. Attempts to guilt him into action fall flat because he doesn't derive his choices from obligation or fear. Bribery feels meaningless because he isn't motivated by reward. Seduction, whether emotional or physical, can't bend him because he doesn't chase validation or affirmation from anyone. In short, he is unmovable, not because he wants to be difficult, but because his foundation doesn't need anyone else to stay intact. This level of self-containment removes any leverage others might think they have. People who are used to controlling or influencing others are left frustrated and confused. They start questioning why their tactics fail, why their words bounce off him, and why the Sigma isn't reacting the way anyone should. That inability to control him isn't a silent boast. It's simply how he exists. But for anyone who thrives on manipulation, it's terrifying. Being self-contained also gives him freedom most people can't comprehend. He can make decisions without consulting an audience, act without needing approval, and exist without performing for anyone's comfort. This freedom makes him unpredictable in ways others can't manage, and unpredictability is a quiet form of power. In essence, the Sigma male's independence is not just a personal trait, it's a force field against control. People who attempt to bend him quickly realize that the usual rules don't apply, and in that realization they feel a rare and often uncomfortable thing: vulnerability. He cannot be owned, steered, or pressured, and that is a level of self-possession that intimidates effortlessly. Number 4, they don't announce boundaries. They enforce them. Sigma males don't waste time explaining rules or negotiating limits. They don't issue warnings, deliver speeches, or engage in endless debates about what's acceptable and what isn't. Their boundaries aren't a topic of discussion. They are a fact of existence. When someone crosses a line, the response is immediate, quiet, and absolute. They disengage, withdraw, or simply vanish from the situation. There's no argument, no justification, and no opportunity for negotiation. This decisiveness is unnerving to people who rely on emotional bargaining or subtle manipulation to get what they want. Most people operate in a world of blurred boundaries, constantly testing limits and trying to push others into compliance. They expect resistance to come with drama, justification, or at least a chance to talk someone down. The Sigma's approach is different. By silently enforcing his boundaries, he removes all avenues for debate. The absence of negotiation is itself a statement. It says more than any speech ever could. I do not bend, and I do not compromise. That clarity, combined with his refusal to engage in emotional theatrics, makes others suddenly hyper-aware of their overstep. This quiet enforcement creates instant respect and, for some, fear. People are shocked not just by the boundary itself, but by how efficiently it's maintained, without argument or emotional display. It exposes a level of self-control and decisiveness most are unprepared for. There's no lingering resentment from the Sigma because he doesn't dwell on conflicts. He simply acts, letting consequences speak for themselves. In essence, Sigma males' boundaries are a form of invisible power. They don't ask for respect. They don't seek acknowledgement. Their actions make it clear what is allowed and what isn't, and anyone who challenges that discovers that boundaries aren't negotiable, they're enforced. That quiet, unshakable decisiveness makes people uneasy because it's so different from the usual push and pull of social interaction. And that difference, that's intimidation without effort. Number 5, their authenticity shames pretenders. Sigma males live in a way that doesn't ask for validation, approval, or applause. They aren't performing, posturing, or curating themselves for anyone's gaze. That kind of raw authenticity has a strange, almost electric effect on the people around them. It exposes everything that is fake, pretentious, or performed. People who rely on charm, exaggeration, or superficial behavior suddenly feel small, awkward, and painfully aware of their own attempts to impress. The Sigma doesn't need to call out dishonesty. His mere presence, his unshakable self-possession, does the work for him. There's a subtle cruelty in this authenticity, not intentional, but inevitable. When someone is faking confidence, masking insecurities, or hiding behind social facades, standing next to someone who is effortlessly real can feel like being exposed under a harsh spotlight. The Sigma isn't trying to shame anyone, but the truth is, authenticity is sharp, and it cuts through pretense like a knife. People sense it instinctively. That quiet contrast forces them to confront the difference between who they are pretending to be and who they actually are. Some respond with respect, silently admiring the freedom and integrity that the Sigma embodies. Others respond with resentment, frustration, or even subtle hostility because they can't control, manipulate, or measure up to someone who doesn't play by the same social rules. That resentment isn't about the Sigma. It's about their own discomfort with authenticity. This effect makes Sigma males intimidating in a way that has nothing to do with aggression or authority. They don't have to prove themselves or dominate space. Their life, lived on their own terms, exposes falsehoods and pretension in a way that's impossible to ignore. The authenticity is magnetic to some and threatening to others. and that polarity is exactly what gives the Sigma his quiet, unavoidable power. People are either drawn to him for his truth or unsettled by it, and either way it leaves a mark. Number 6. They radiate focus that feels dangerous. Sigma males possess a level of focus that borders on obsession, and it's the kind of intensity that makes people uneasy without them even trying. When they lock onto a goal, a task, or an idea, the rest of the world simply fades away. They don't get distracted by small talk, social drama, or trivial matters. That single-mindedness creates an energy that feels almost predatory to those whose attention flits from one thing to the next. People can sense it instinctively. There's a sharpness in their presence, a weight in their attention, and a quiet force that demands recognition. Most people live scattered lives, juggling multiple tasks while barely giving any of them real energy. Their distractions, excuses, and half-hearted attempts are exposed when they observe someone moving through life with the precision and intensity of a Sigma. That focus makes others hyper-aware of their own lack of discipline, their indecision, and their wasted energy. Suddenly, the Sigma isn't just a person. He's a mirror, reflecting every compromise, every distraction, every moment of unfulfilled potential. What makes this truly intimidating is that the Sigma doesn't flaunt it or make anyone feel small on purpose. There's no arrogance, no showmanship. He simply channels his energy so effectively that it feels impossible to ignore. The effect is almost magnetic and simultaneously unsettling. People feel drawn to the clarity and power of his attention, but they also feel threatened by it. The intensity is a silent declaration that he can accomplish more in a day than most manage in a week, and he does it without noise or boasting. That kind of focus communicates more than words ever could. It signals competence, control, and a level of commitment that most people find both aspirational and frightening. When a Sigma male locks in, he doesn't just act. He dominates the mental space of everyone around him, forcing them to recognize the stark difference between fleeting distractions and unshakable purpose. That quiet, almost predatory intensity is one of the most effective forms of intimidation because it exposes weakness without ever needing to confront it directly. Number 7. They don't flirt. They study. Sigma males approach social and romantic interactions differently from almost everyone else. They don't rely on charm, jokes, or superficial displays to capture attention. Instead, they watch, analyze, and quietly observe before deciding if and how to engage. That observation is deep, intentional, and precise. They notice patterns in behavior, subtle inconsistencies, and the unspoken truths people often hide even from themselves. It's not about manipulation. It's about understanding the dynamics before stepping in. This method of engagement has a strange psychological effect on those around them. People are used to being seen in broad strokes, flattery, casual attention, or surface-level connection. But the Sigma sees the details. He doesn't just notice what you do, he notices why you do it, what you avoid, and what you really want. That level of attention feels both flattering and intimidating because most people crave recognition without realizing how much clarity they can handle. Being studied like that, silently, without comment, creates an invisible pressure. It's as if someone has taken a mental X-ray of your personality and can see every attempt at facade. The controlled interest of a Sigma male also communicates dominance. It signals that he chooses where to invest energy and that his attention isn't given lightly. This makes others feel a subtle tension. If they want his acknowledgement, they have to be genuine, because superficiality is transparent to him. It's a rare kind of power that doesn't rely on manipulation, intimidation, or aggression. It simply comes from mastery of observation and selective engagement. People are drawn to him because of the clarity and intensity of his attention, yet unsettled because it forces self-awareness. The Sigma doesn't flirt in the conventional sense. He studies, he evaluates, and he engages only when the connection aligns with his standards. That quiet, deliberate scrutiny is disarming. It gives the impression of psychological dominance without a single word, leaving others aware that they are being fully seen, and that level of perceptiveness is as intimidating as it is magnetic. Number 8. They don't chase connection, they filter it. Sigma. Males don't rush to make friends, win approval, or be liked. They operate on a different frequency entirely. Instead of seeking validation through constant social interaction, they observe first, analyze patterns, and measure character before deciding if someone is worth their attention. Connection, for a Sigma, is deliberate and selective. It's not a game of popularity or a race to be socially approved. It's a quiet assessment of substance, values, and compatibility. This approach unnerves people who rely on instant affirmation. In a world where social currency often comes from likes, attention, or agreement, the Sigma's selective engagement feels like rejection even when it's not personal. People expect immediate warmth, validation, or reciprocal energy, but the Sigma gives nothing that isn't earned. That absence of automatic approval forces others to confront their own motivations and often highlights how much they rely on external validation. The filtering process is subtle but powerful. He doesn't broadcast judgment, yet his presence alone signals that he's assessing depth, consistency, and authenticity. Small talk and shallow attempts at connection don't impress him. Only sincerity and substance register. That kind of discernment destabilizes people who are used to superficial acceptance, making them second-guess their actions, words, and even their social strategies. For Sigma males, energy is finite and valuable. They don't waste it on performative relationships or hollow alliances. That efficiency in connection communicates unspoken authority. You are either worth engaging with, or you are not. This quiet, selective approach is both magnetic and intimidating, because it flips the usual social dynamic. Instead of chasing people, they make others subtly chase approval or recognition, only to find that it's not freely given. By refusing to hand out emotional credit indiscriminately, Sigma males create a natural filter that separates substance from pretense, integrity from superficiality, and in doing so, they unsettle anyone who is used to the social world operating on instant reciprocal validation. Their social power is invisible, but it's profoundly effective, the kind that makes people aware, deeply aware, of where they stand. Number 9. Their calmness feels like dominance. Sigma males carry a calmness that feels almost unnatural, and it becomes most obvious during moments of chaos. While everyone around them is flustered, reactive, or scrambling for control, the Sigma remains unshaken. He doesn't overreact, argue, or try to force solutions. He simply observes, processes, and moves with quiet certainty. That composed demeanor has a strange, magnetic quality. It draws attention not because it's loud, but because it highlights the fragility and emotional volatility of everyone else. People can't help but compare themselves to this stillness. Their own panic, hesitation, or overcomplicated attempts to manage a situation suddenly feel childish or excessive. The contrast is stark, and it's deeply unsettling. They realize that their reactions are loud, reactive, and often unnecessary, while the Sigma navigates the same environment effortlessly. That recognition breeds both admiration and intimidation. Admiration for the control and intimidation from the subtle realization that they could never replicate it. What makes this even more disarming is that the Sigma doesn't intend to dominate through calmness. There's no performance or attempt to assert authority. The control exists naturally because he doesn't let the chaos affect him. That quiet strength becomes a silent form of leadership and dominance without anyone having to be told or persuaded. People instinctively respect it, but they also feel a subtle discomfort. They are suddenly hyper-aware of how little control they actually have over their own reactions. Calmness in a world obsessed with noise, drama, and reaction is power in its purest form. It's invisible, yet it alters the dynamics of any situation. The Sigma male doesn't need to raise his voice or take charge explicitly. His stillness does all the work. That quiet, unshakable composure becomes a mirror reflecting everyone else's impatience, anxiety, and impulsiveness, and the effect is profoundly intimidating. Number 10. They don't signal power. They embody it. Sigma males don't need to announce their presence, boast about accomplishments, or show off wealth or influence. Their power isn't performative, it's intrinsic, radiating quietly through every action, every pause, every glance. They don't puff their chest, raise their voice, or compete for attention. Instead, their authority comes from restraint, confidence, and an unshakable sense of self. People instinctively recognize it, even if they can't put their finger on why. This subtle embodiment of power is far more intimidating than loud displays, because it doesn't invite confrontation or ego comparison. Most people gauge authority through noise, aggression, or social validation, but the Sigma doesn't operate on those terms. His calm, measured presence signals that he is completely in control of himself and his environment, and that quiet certainty is disarming. Loud egos and performative personalities often find themselves shrinking in response, not because the Sigma asserts dominance outwardly, but because he already owns it internally. There's a magnetic paradox in this. People are drawn to him, yet simultaneously unsettled. They want to challenge or impress him, but they quickly realize it's futile. The Sigma isn't competing for recognition. He simply is, and that alone sets a standard most can't reach. That calm power, rooted in self-possession rather than performance, creates a psychological pressure that can make others question their own confidence, strategies, and social standing. Real authority doesn't advertise itself, and Sigma males prove this effortlessly. They embody power in a way that's invisible yet undeniable. You can't argue with it, manipulate it, or outshine it because it doesn't depend on external validation. And that's precisely why their presence is so intimidating. It's authentic, unshakable, and entirely their own. Number 11. They observe people like data, not drama. Sigma males don't get caught up in the theatrics of human behavior. While most people notice feelings, reactions, or social noise, the Sigma scans for patterns, inconsistencies, and underlying motives. He treats interactions like a data set, quietly recording behaviors, responses, and subtle cues. That analytical approach makes people around him feel exposed because they sense they're being observed at a level far beyond casual attention. This isn't judgment or curiosity in a superficial sense. It's a deep, intuitive understanding of human behavior. The Sigma doesn't need to confront or call anyone out. His awareness alone is enough to make people self-conscious. They start second-guessing what they say, how they move, and even the intentions behind their actions, because they can feel the silent scrutiny. There's an almost clinical precision in how he processes social information, and it unnerves those used to more performative interactions. People instinctively hide behind dramatics, exaggeration, or social masks to gain approval or steer perception. But around a Sigma, those tactics are transparent. He doesn't react to the drama. He simply observes and understands it. That creates a subtle psychological pressure. They can't control his perception, they can't manipulate his reactions, and they realize that pretending or exaggerating is pointless. The impact of this observation is profound. By seeing beyond surface behavior, the Sigma exposes unconscious truths without saying a word. People feel decoded, analyzed, and understood in ways they aren't used to. The quiet intensity of his attention makes them hyper-aware of their own inconsistencies and insecurities. In a room full of performance and posturing, the Sigma male's analytical gaze is invisible yet powerful. It doesn't intimidate with noise, aggression, or confrontation. It intimidates by making others confront the reality of themselves. That combination of calm observation and psychological insight is rare, and it's one of the most disarming, quietly dominant traits a Sigma can possess. Number 12. They refuse to be emotionally hooked. In a world where most people are constantly reacting, craving attention, or getting pulled into drama, Sigma males operate on an entirely different level. They don't take the bait, no matter how tempting the manipulation, guilt trip, or provocation may be. Their emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. They are fully aware of the currents around them, but refuse to be swept away by them. That makes them unpredictable and, to manipulators, nearly untouchable. People who thrive on controlling others rely on reactions. They depend on eliciting anger, fear, jealousy, or flattery to gain influence. With a Sigma, these tactics fail spectacularly. The usual triggers that make people react, social pressure, emotional appeals, or subtle coercion, simply bounce off. There's no visible resistance, no defensive argument, and no overreaction. The Sigma remains calm, collected, and in full control of his inner state, which is terrifying to those accustomed to holding power over others. What makes this even more unnerving is that the Sigma doesn't need to prove he is detached. He doesn't lecture, warn, or display superiority. He simply refuses to engage on emotional terms that aren't aligned with his own standards. That kind of immunity to manipulation communicates strength silently, but it's loud enough to unsettle anyone who depends on leverage through emotional chaos. The effect is psychological dominance without aggression. People realize, often too late, that they cannot control, sway, or influence him through the usual social or emotional tricks. They begin to doubt their own tactics, their timing, and their ability to read or manipulate him. That uncertainty, that quiet acknowledgement of someone operating outside the rules they rely on, is inherently intimidating. A Sigma's refusal to be emotionally hooked isn't about winning battles, it's about maintaining sovereignty over his own mind and energy. And that level of independence is one of the most disarming, quietly dominant traits anyone can possess, leaving manipulators and control seekers profoundly unsettled. In the world of social dynamics, Sigma males operate on a plane most people don't even notice until it's too late. They don't intimidate through noise, aggression, or posturing. They don't need validation, approval, or applause to exist, yet their presence alone commands attention, respect, and a quiet, undeniable influence. From their unwavering standards to their impenetrable calm, from their laser-focused intensity to their deep, almost surgical observation of people, they leave a mark on everyone around them, whether it's admiration, envy, or a subtle, unsettling awareness of one's own weaknesses. What makes Sigma males truly extraordinary is that all of this happens without effort, without announcement, and without a single act meant to dominate. They move through life like a force of nature, selective, discerning, and self-contained, exposing pretense, testing authenticity, and subtly recalibrating the social environment around them. People feel it instinctively, the presence of someone who cannot be manipulated, whose attention cannot be bought, whose emotional core is untouchable. That is power disguised as silence, authority disguised as calm, and influence disguised as neutrality. And here lies the secret that so few understand. The intimidation they create is not born from aggression or malice. It is born from truth, from self-possession, from clarity in a world obsessed with noise. Being around a Sigma forces people to confront themselves, to face what they are, what they pretend to be, and what they aspire to become. That kind of influence is invisible yet unforgettable, subtle yet seismic, and it changes the way people perceive not just the Sigma, but themselves. If you found yourself drawn to these insights, if you felt the tension, the fascination, the magnetic pull of Sigma energy, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the minds and behaviors that shape the unshakable. Comment your thoughts, experiences, or revelations below, and share this with anyone who needs to understand the quiet power that moves through life unseen yet unstoppable. Trust me, this is the kind of content that doesn't just inform, it transforms the way you see people, power, and the invisible forces that rule our social world.